Hi there, my name is Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel BandysBooks. Today I am here to talk to you about my September TBR. First, can you believe it is already September and almost the fall? I'm so excited. I am ready for this summer to be over. It's been ridiculously hot and humid here in Vegas. We've been having this crazy monsoon season and so I'm so done with it. I am ready for cold weather, for autumn leaves, sweaters, pumpkin spice, Halloween, all of that good stuff. So in honor of that, I am celebrating a couple different things on my TBR this month, and I'm very excited to tell you about them. So I'm kind of splitting my TBR in half, and the reason is that I wanted to participate in two different things. Two of the accounts that I follow here on BookTube, Krista from Books and Jams and Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand, are hosting Series September. And for me, that sounded like the perfect thing to get involved in because I have so many unfinished series that I need to read and a couple of series that I have completed but I haven't actually read yet. So I was inspired to get involved with the Series September in motivation to clear some of these series off my shelves or test out some of the series that I have a single book from and I just need to see if I'm going to pursue the whole series. So the first portion of my TBR will be based on series. The second portion of my TBR is going to be revolving around Hispanic Heritage Month. So I have books by Latin American authors from many different countries about many different topics that I will be reading in the second half of the month. So I want to go ahead and get into these books, tell you a little bit about each set of books, and because there's so many of them, even more than usual, and I know I usually do like 20 to 25 books for my TBR, and it's even a little bit bigger than that. So we're going to just go through these super quickly so I can just give you a rough idea of what I'm looking at instead of like a really detailed deep dive into the book, because otherwise we'll be here for like 2 or 3 hours and I definitely don't want to keep you here listening to my ramblings that long. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into it. First up on my Series September list is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. You may have seen this previously. I'm actually already 200 pages into it. I don't know what it is. This book is really well written and actually quite interesting. Like when I sit down and read it, I'm really engaged and I do tend to read a big chunk of it at once. But for whatever reason, I kind of like keep forgetting to go back. It's something like 800 pages. And so I don't know if it's just, I don't know what it is, but I need to get back into this. This, I would say, is kind of similar to the way that Game of Thrones felt in that there's multiple different locations and multiple different characters that we're following as POVs. It isn't definitely not as violent or as graphic, but it does have that like epic fantasy feeling to it. And I know that Samantha Shannon just dropped, I think, the prequel to this story. So I am wanting to complete this so I can get into the prequel when it does come out, or if it's already released, pick it up soon. And so we will be continuing on with this. I'm thinking about maybe doing a reading vlog later in the month on this one to help kind of motivate me to read this all the way through. After that, I have Every Heart a Doorway by Shannon McGuire. This is a 7 or 8 book series, and all of the books are relatively small. This is about a world where there's doorways that exist and kids slip through them and have different experiences and then come back to the world that they belong in. And basically, Nancy once tumbled down one and she has come back. She's experienced things that have changed her, and the only person that really understands that is Mrs. West. So Miss West runs a children's school to help children that have experienced this tumbling through these doorways. I have heard mixed things on the first book. I've heard that the first book can be kind of disconcerting, not the best writing, but that the series as a whole is really good. So I'm going to test out the first, and I'll probably pick up the second as well and see how that is. And after that, I'm going to see if I'm feeling it enough to kind of continue through all 8 books. After that, I have The Kinder Poison. These ones are all like the first book in the series where I'm just testing a series. So this book is The Kinder Poison by Natalie May. This is the first book in the series, and it features a character named Zaru who has some magical powers that make her place in this kingdom of Orkena as a stablemate. She is there to take care of her animals. She communes with the animals, and that's the way that she serves the royal family. This all changes when the royal family announces a crossing. So the crossing is a death-defying race across the desert, and Zaru is interested in this, so she leaps at the chance one night to kind of come into the royal palace and see what's going on with the crossing. What ends up happening is a minor indiscretion turns into a deadly mistake when she gets caught up in a feud between the heirs and is forced to become the crossing's human sacrifice. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. I've heard good things about it, and this cover is just absolutely stunning. I do know that the next book in the series is out, so if I like this one, I'll be picking that one up as well. And then I have Ever the Hunted by Erin Summerall. This was a book that I actually found in a little free library up in Utah. Also another really pretty cover, and I really like that this series, the covers kind of stay the same way, but we have one cover that's red, one cover that's blue. So I really like when authors do that, maybe switch up the colors, but kind of keep the style the same. This is about a young woman who is a hunter, I believe, in the forest with her father. Yeah, she's 17 years old, Britta Flannery. She's good with a dagger and a bow, and she spends her days tracking criminals alongside her father, the legendary bounty hunter for the king of Milan. And then eventually her father is murdered. Now she's outcast and alone, having no rights to her father's land or inheritance, and she seeks refuge where she feels most safe, the Everwoods. She is eventually caught poaching by the royal guard, and instead of facing the noose, she's offered a deal: her freedom in exchange for her father's killer. So I'm really interested in this one. I always love like tough female characters that are, you know, maybe equipped with bows or swords or whatever. I think that's a lot of fun. I think this should be an interesting book. I don't know a whole ton about this series. I have seen it popping up a little bit like on Pango Books for sale, but I don't know too many people that have actually read it. So I'm kind of going into this a little bit blind. After that, I have The Number One Ladies Detective Agency by Alexandra McCall Smith. This, as I understand it, is sort of a cozy mystery series. I found this in a little free library. I wasn't actually going to pick it up because that's not usually like my typical reading genre, but my mom told me that this one was really good and very enjoyable and suggested that it might be a good counterbalance to some of like the darker reading that I do. So it's also really short. It's only a little over 200 pages. We're looking at like 235 at the end. So this will be a nice quick read to balance out some of the, like I said, heavier reads in this TBR. After that, I have Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. So this has been, I feel like, a quietly growing attention on different social media. I've seen both this book and the next book in the series popping up a lot lately. This is basically set in the Civil War era. A couple days after the Battle of Gettysburg, the dead wake up and start walking the battlefield. So we have historical fiction and zombies. I'm here for it. I think this is going to be really interesting, especially moving in towards spooky season. I kind of feel like this is going to have a spooky vibe, obviously. So I'm going to read the first book in the series and then see how that is. I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up liking it and picking up book number 2. And once again, another really pretty cover. After that, I have a book called The Queen of the Tierling by Erica Johansson. This is probably one of my favorite book covers. It's just so pretty. I found this at a secondhand store on their book sale shelf. I think it cost me like $1.50 or $2. And I actually had never heard of this series before. I thought the cover was really compelling, so I gave it a little read and was excited to find that it sounds like just my cup of tea. We have young Kelsia Raleigh, who was raised in hiding after the death of her mother, Queen Alyssa, far from the intrigues of the royal keep and in the care of 2 devoted servants who pledged their lives to protect her. Growing up in a cottage deep in the woods, Kelsia knows little of her kingdom's haunted past, or that its fate will soon rest in her hands. So Kelsey is gonna have to stand up and take her place, and I am looking forward to it. This book is so pretty. It comes with like a nice bookmarker and then the drawings on the inside. Like I said, I'm just really into how pretty this is, and it's got the feathered pages and everything. Just a stunning book. After that, I have Defy the Night by Bridget Kemmerer. Sorry, that's super hard for me to say. Like, there's just too many R's at the end. So Defy the Night, another gorgeous book. This one has been all over Bookstagram in particular. I haven't seen it as much on BookTube, but lots on Bookstagram. And I think that's because the cover is just so photogenic. This is about the kingdom of Kandala. It is on the brink of disaster. And the only thing that is making things better, so there's a sickness that's ravaging the population, and the only thing that can cure this sickness is a moonflower petal, but it's severely limited, and the king holds on to a tenuous peace with a ruthless hand. So out in the wilds, apothecary apprentice Tessa Cade and her best friend Wes are tired of watching people suffer. They've decided that they're going to risk their lives every night to steal moonflower petals and distribute the elixir to those in need, but it's still not enough. So I'm really excited about this. I think this is going to be a really cool book. I love the idea of there being a plague and this cure that's able to fix it but not accessible for whatever reason. I think this is going to be great. I've heard really good things, and again, if this one works out really well, I'll be picking up the second one as well. Okay, so those were all the first books in the series. This stack right here are books that are further into a series. So like I've already started the series, and this is the next one in the progression. So the first book I have is The Queen of Atolia by Megan Whalen Turner. I read the first book, The Thief, last year, which I really loved, and I'm so excited. I actually found this series because at my local bookstore, I had asked one of the ladies working there for a recommendation, and she said this was her favorite series, that if I liked fantasy, I would probably really like this one. So I jumped into this, not knowing anything about it, went in blind, which is the best thing you can do with this series. I loved The Thief. It was light, but enjoyable, interesting, kept me turning the pages, and I decided that I liked it enough that I wanted to get hardback covers. The only problem is that because this is an older series, it's super hard to find hardback covers, or they're like extremely expensive. So I found this one on Amazon as a used book for like $2 and immediately rushed it to my house. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to accrue more of the series as I continue. But this is the next one up. I'm excited to get into it. Now, this next book, if you've been following this channel for any length of time, you will know that last year I read Black Sun, and it was one of my favorite reads of the year. Definitely probably my favorite start to a series in a really long time, and a series that I feel like I'm going to continue to love. So I have book number 2 of that series, Fevered Star by Rebecca Romanhorse, and also a stunner. I have hardbacks of the first and the second book, and I'm so excited about finally getting into this one. I know it's been out for a little while, and I've been meaning to read it before now, but since it's series September, this seems like destiny. For sure gonna knock this one off the TBR this month. This is kind of a continuation of where Black Sun left off. We have a handful of characters in precarious situations, and we have a struggle for power between a couple different religious factions. I am really looking forward to this. I have heard a little bit of criticism that this book doesn't really, nothing happens that's super exciting. It's more just kind of a continuation and putting all the players into place before the final installment. I'm okay with that. I think I'm going in with reasonable expectations, but I am stoked nonetheless to revisit these characters. After that, so I have one book. I actually need to read 2 books, but I don't have the first book. So I last month read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which I really enjoyed. It was a fun start to the series. I have a copy of As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, which I actually won in a giveaway from Holly Jackson on Instagram. I do not have the middle installment, Good Girl Bad Blood, yet. I will either be picking up Good Girl Bad Blood, or I'll be listening to it on audiobook and then reading this one because I want to continue with the series. I'm super excited to find out what happens with Pip and Ravi. If you're somehow unfamiliar with this series, it is a young adult kind of a mystery. And in the first book, Pip and Ravi basically are investigating a crime to clear Ravi's brother of murder. And it gets a little bit dark, but it's overall like a pretty light story. There's a lot of humor and stuff that I feel like was pretty authentic to high schoolers. So I'm excited to see where Pip has gone from that story. Both of these, I think, are continuations and murder mysteries, perhaps. So I'm looking forward to getting into them. I know that this series is highly revered on a lot of social media, and so far, so good for me. I'm going to start getting into duologies now. So I have 4 duologies that I want to talk about. The first couple are The Wild Robot and The Wild Robot Escapes, both by Peter Brown. I found these the other day in a thrift store for $1 a piece, and I was very excited about them. I've heard that these are really cute books. They're both about Roz, who is a robot. She is on a island, a remote wild island, and she has no idea how she got there or what her purpose is. She just knows that she needs to survive. Eventually, she befriends animals on the island, and it starts to feel like home until one day the robot's mysterious past comes back to haunt her. So I've heard great things about book 1. Book 2, I believe she's escaped and she's on a farm, and she is desperate to escape that farm and return to her island to find her son. Both books look to be really cute. There's illustrations in the different chapters, and you can tell this is just gonna be a cute, easy read. I love when they include illustrations. So these books are, there's no page numbers, so I can't tell you how long they are. I want to say they're just over 200 pages. So this should be a nice, quick, easy read. Also something fun, hopefully in between some of the heavier stuff. And then I have We Hunt the Flame and We Free the Stars by Hafsa Faisal. These books are both stunners as well. And this series follows two different characters. Zafira, who is a huntress and disguises herself as a man to protect herself while out hunting. And Nasir, who is the Prince of Death. He is responsible for assassinating those foolish enough to defy his autocratic father, the Sultan. Zafira fears being exposed as a girl because, you know, all of her achievements will then be rejected. And Nasir is afraid of displaying any compassion because his father will punish him in the most brutal of ways. Both Zafira and Nasir are legends in the kingdom of Arawiya, but neither wants to be. So I'm curious to see basically how their two stories come together, what happens if they're going to overthrow this autocrat, and then what happens in the book 2. I've heard really good things about this from most people that have read them. These are a little heftier, not like crazy hefty, but book 2 is probably into like 600 pages, I want to say. Oh, what's up with these books and not labeling page numbers? Yeah, just about 600 pages on the first one, and probably a good 600 on the second one, and almost 500 on the first one. So we're looking at about 1,100 pages of reading between this two. Now, my next two duologies kind of fit between my series September and my Hispanic Heritage / Latin American Heritage Month. So I have two duologies I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to start getting into standalones. The reason I picked up some standalones is because I want to make sure that in celebrating Hispanic heritage and Latin American heritage that I am reading diversely across a broad spectrum of countries and representing a broad amount of viewpoints. I don't want to just read like only fantasy duologies. I want to read a bunch of different stuff. So I've incorporated a bunch of standalones to kind of balance that out. So before I get into this section of my TBR, I just want to make a really quick distinction. I know that there's a little bit of controversy between the word Hispanic and Latino and what people prefer to identify as. I am not going to make a case for anyone to identify themselves anyway, because as a white person, obviously, it is not my job to tell people how to identify themselves. So if you identify as Hispanic or if you identify as Latino, Latina, Latine, whichever, all good. I, for the purpose of this video, will be using Latino, Latina. The reason being is because I was taught in my travels and in my experience living at the border and in life that Hispanic is specific to people of Spanish descent, whereas Latino includes people not just of Spanish descent, but like people from Brazil, which are Portuguese descent, people in the Caribbean, Afro-Latinos, and Indigenous Latinos. In regards to these books, I will be celebrating Latin American authors and Latin American heritage, and I hope that if you are pursuing books by Latin American authors, that maybe you'll check out some of these, because I think we have some really good ones to talk about. So the first duology that I am going to be reading is Written in Starlight and Woven in Moonlight by Isabel Ibanez. These are probably the prettiest covers on this list, and I feel like I've been saying that a lot, but these ones really are stunners. So Isabel Ibanez is from Bolivian descent. Her parents are Bolivian and she grew up here in the US, and so this book is kind of inspired by some Bolivian mythology and Bolivian culture. I am really looking forward to them. They both are set in different periods of time, and they are both revolving around someone who is a condesa. The way that I am understanding condesa is that she's like the leader of her people. In the first book, Catalina Quiroga is a condesa without a country. She's lost the Incasisa throne, the loyalty of her people, and her best friend. Banished to the perilous Llano jungle, Catalina knows her chances of survival are slim, but that won't stop her from trying to escape. Her duty is to rule. And in this other book, I think actually that this one is the first one, Woven in Moonlight, Written in Starlight is the second. In this book, Ximena is the decoy condesa, a stand-in for the last remaining Elestrian royal. Her people lost everything when the usurper Atok used an ancient relic to summon ghosts and drive the Elestrians from La Ciudad. Now Ximena's motivated by her insatiable thirst for revenge and her rare ability to spin thread from moonlight. So I am looking forward to getting into both of these. I think they're going to be very interesting. And after that, I have a series called Lobizona and Cazadora by Romina Garber. These are also stunners of book covers, and these are books set in the United States initially, but that end up in Argentina. So Manuela Azul has been crammed into an existence that feels small for her. As an undocumented immigrant who's on the run from her father's Argentinian crime family, Manu is confirmed to a small apartment and a small life in Miami, Florida. And then her bubble gets popped. Her grandmother is murdered and lifelong lies are exposed. Her mother is arrested by ICE. So without a home, without answers, and finally without shackles, Manu investigates the only clue that she has about her past, a mysterious Z emblem, which leads her to a secret world buried within our own. And then this one continues on from the conclusion in this one. These books are stunning. I am excited about the possible magical world set in Argentina that I think she's setting up. And also, look at the insides of these. I love it, again, when books include illustrations inside the books. Romina Garber is originally from Argentina, and I believe she lives in the States now. I am really looking forward to getting into both of these. Again, beautiful books. So those are my two duologies that are both for Series September and also Latin American Heritage. So now we're going to get into standalone books, and I've got, like I said, a diverse set of subjects here. I have a couple nonfiction, a couple fiction, and a little bit of mix of things. I'm really looking forward to the majority of these books. Ordinary Girls by Yakira Diaz. So Yakira Diaz writes in this book about her childhood and coming of age. She talks about growing up in housing projects both in Puerto Rico and in Miami Beach and finding herself caught between extremes. Her family is split apart and her mother is battling schizophrenia, and she was supported by the love of her friends. As she longed for a home and a family, her life was upended by violence. As she celebrated her Puerto Rican culture, she couldn't find support for her bourgeois sexual identity. From her own struggles with depression and sexual assault to Puerto Rico's history of colonialism, every page of Ordinary Girls vibrates with music and lyricism. So I think this is going to be maybe not necessarily the easiest read because it does deal with some very difficult topics, but I imagine this is going to be really well written and moving. And I think this will offer me some perspectives perhaps on like Puerto Rican heritage and the ties between the US and Puerto Rico and colonialism and whatnot. So I am looking forward to getting into this. The next book after that I have is The Book of Rosie by Rosaira Pablo Cruz and Julie Schweitert Collazo. So this is a mother's story of separation at the border. This is about Rosaria, or Rosie in this case, and she makes the very, very difficult decision to seek asylum in the United States. She's from Guatemala and her family is dealing with crime and threats and danger, and she just doesn't want her children to grow up around that. So she decides that they're going to go north to the border and claim asylum. They go through a brutal, brutal journey. They are dehydrated, exhausted, nearly starved, and they make it to the Arizona border. At the border, Rosie is separated from her children, and this is the story of what happens after they get separated, the fight to get the children back, to find out what's going on, and to try to find peace. I have a little bit of personal experience with border detainment and with immigration into the United States from Central and South America and whatnot. So I feel like this is going to really hit home for me. I know how messed up the system is already. I have quite a bit of firsthand experience with that. So I know this is going to be a real difficult read for me. I know it's going to make me angry and frustrated, but I think it's so important to read stories like this, even knowing that it's going to make you angry and frustrated, because this is reality and this is a person's experience. And the only way that we can make this system better is by being aware of the problems. After that, I have What Would Frida Do by Ariana Davis, A Guide to Living Boldly. So this is about, it says here, quote unquote, in What Would Frida Do, Ariana Davis explores the Latinx and feminist icon's signature style, outspoken politics, passionate love life, and courageous art, even in the face of pain and heartbreak. The book celebrates a woman who loved deeply and lived ambitiously, refusing to remain in the shadow of her famous muralist husband, Diego Rivera. Frida overcame obstacles by embracing her ideals and soon became a legend, one who drank heavily, painted provocatively, and lusted freely, sparking rumors about her relationships with everyone from Leon Trotsky to Josephine Baker. I am very interested in this. I have visited some sites in Mexico City and Guanajuato regarding Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. So I do know a little bit of history, but I actually don't know as much about Frida Kahlo as I would like. I haven't actually ever read a book about her specifically, so I'm hoping that I'll be learning a little bit about her and her history here. Next up, I have In the Time of the Butterflies by Julia Alvarez. Julia Alvarez is Dominican, and this story is about sisters, and it's set in the Dominican Republic. So Julia Alvarez left the Dominican Republic in 1960 at the age of 10. She's so far written 6 novels, 3 books of nonfiction, 3 collections of poetry, and 11 books for children and young adults. I have actually read one of her other books. I am looking forward to getting into this one. So this is about 4 sisters in the 1960s, and they are found dead in their wrecked Jeep at the bottom of a 150-foot cliff on the north coast of the Dominican Republic. The official newspaper reports that their deaths are an accident. The problem is that the 4th sister is still alive, and this doesn't explain that the young women were among the leading opponents of General Rafael Leonidas Trujillo's dictatorship. So I think this is going to explore whether this is coincidence that these 3 sisters were killed, even though, I think the implication is that because they were actively fighting against the dictatorship, that they were perhaps murdered for that social activity. I also think I'll get to learn a little bit more about the Dominican Republic's history. And then after that, I have a book that I was so excited to find. So just a brief little bit of background. In California, Sandra Cisneros is required reading in, I want to say 5th or 6th grade. Her book, The House on Mango Street, was on my school reading list as a child. And I remember really falling in love with her style of writing. It was all these snippets of short stories of life, and it really explored Chicano identity and what it meant to be Chicana. And I really appreciated her context and her experiences, and her writing style was just so pretty. It's easy to follow as a young person, but also engaging and interesting. I found the book Caramello by Sandra Cisneros on a bookshelf recently, and this is about a character named Sayala Lala Reyes, and every year her family, her aunts, uncles, mothers, fathers, older brothers, everybody crams into a bunch of cars and they take a drive from Chicago all the way down to Mexico City for the summer to visit their grandparents. This is kind of about a woman who's struggling to find a voice above the boom of her brothers and to understand her place on this side of the border and that. Lala is a shrewd observer of family life, but when she starts telling the awful grandmother's life story, seeking clues to how she got to be so awful, grandmother accuses Lala of exaggerating. Soon, a multi-generational family narrative turns into a whirlwind exploration of storytelling, lies, and life. This sounds excellent. I'm so excited to get into it. And then I have a book by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I think this is maybe the last book of hers that I haven't read, aside from the very newest one that she just dropped. So she recently came out with The Daughter of Dr. Moreau. I have not read that one, but other than that, this is the only one I have left, and that is The Beautiful Ones. I believe this deals with people who are telekinetic. So we have Nina, who is practicing telekinesis, and she meets Hector one day when he arrives in town. So he's a dazzling entertainer, and he's also telekinetic like her. He's traveled the world performing his talents for admiring audiences, and he sees Nina not as a witch, but ripe with potential to master her power under his tutelage. I am looking forward to getting into this. I've heard kind of mixed reviews about this one. I don't think it's as well known as some of her other books, so we will see, and also the beautiful cover as well. I also have The Woman from Uruguay by Pedro Mayral. Pedro Mayral is a professor of English literature in Buenos Aires, and this particular book is about Lucas Pereira, who is an unemployed writer in his 40s, and he embarks on a day trip from Buenos Aires to Montevideo, which is the capital of Uruguay, to pick up $15,000 in cash. It sounds like while he's on this journey to Montevideo, he is thinking about his relationship with his wife and the struggles that they're going through. It sounds like things are not good and that potentially his wife may be having an affair. It also sounds like he sees a beautiful woman or meets a beautiful woman in Montevideo and then can't get that woman out of his head. This is probably the shortest book on this TBR, I think. Comes in at just 150 pages. Next up, I have Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. This is written by a Colombian author. She has won all sorts of awards. She won the Colombia's National Book Award called the Premio Biblioteca de Narrativa Colombiana, and she's a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. This is about Talia. She's being held at a correctional facility for adolescent girls in the forested mountains of Colombia after committing an impulsive act of violence which may or may not have been necessary. She needs to get out and get back home to Bogota, where her father and plane ticket to the United States are waiting for her. If she misses her flight, she might also miss her chance to finally be reunited with her family in the north. And then this is going to go into how her family came to occupy 2 different countries, and we'll see Talia's parents, Mauro and Elena, fall in love, and we'll learn about their family history. I've heard really good things about this book. This is another short one. I want to say it's only like 200 pages maybe, if that. Yeah, just 10 pages shy of 200 pages. So another hopefully quick read. I feel like I can't have this TBR without a classic book on it, and I have read most of this author's works. That is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and this is Love in the Time of Cholera. Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a super, super famous writer in Spanish. I have read Cien Años de Soledad in Spanish, and I've also read Amor y Otros Demonios, so that would be 100 Years of Solitude and Love and Other Demons. I enjoyed both of those books, and this was one of the ones I have not read yet. I happened to find this English translation at my local library book sale, and so I picked it up. And this is about a gentleman named Florentino Ariza, and he is waited to declare once again his undying love to Fermina Daza, whom he courted and almost won so many years before. He has the bad grace, however, to make his declaration at the funeral of her husband, one of the most illustrious men of his time, patron of the arts, distinguished professor of medicine, and leader in the fight against the cholera epidemics that once ravaged the country. Shaken by Florentino's bold speech, Fermina banishes him from her house. So I have heard that there are some potentially difficult themes in here. After that, I have On a Night of 1,000 Stars by Andrea Yayura Clark. So Andrea grew up in Argentina amid the political turmoil of the 1970s, and then eventually her family relocated to North America. So if you're unfamiliar with 1970s Argentina, after Perón, there was a coup d'etat that overthrew one of his wives, I believe, who was ruling the country, and it started a very severe war called La Guerra Sucia, or the Dirty War, and thousands upon thousands of Argentinians basically disappeared. Government, police, or military operatives would basically come in and arrest doctors, teachers, professors, college students, basically anybody that might be educated and potentially liberal. And then they either murdered them or put them in concentration camps. And it is really a brutal, dark period of Argentinian history. There's still tons of people that have disappeared, that have not been found, where there's no conclusive answer to what happened to them. And I know that this book delves into that period of history. So, New York, 1998, Santiago Larrea, a wealthy Argentinian diplomat, is holding court alongside his wife Lila and their daughter, Paloma, a college student and budding jewelry designer, at their annual summer polo match and soiree. All seems perfect in the Larrea's world until an unexpected party guest from Santiago's university days shakes his usually unflappable demeanor. The woman's cryptic comments spark Paloma's curiosity about her father's past, of which she knows little. So I think once she starts investigating her father's past, she's going to find out that there's some history regarding La Guerra Sucia and a particular period. If you're really interested in this subject, I also would recommend as supplemental reading a book called The Little School in English, or La Escuelita in Spanish. It was written by Alicia Partanoy, who was a Argentinian Jewish woman, and she was actually held in a concentration camp during La Guerra Sucia. This particular book, La Escuelita, or The Little School, is about her personal experiences. It's a memoir told in short story form. It's very dark and it's very brutal, but it is enlightening in terms of learning about this particular period of Argentinian history. I just wanted to mention that if you've read this and or are going to read this and you're interested in a more an actual memoir of that period of time. After that, I have a book from Isabel Allende, which is In the Midst of Winter. I've heard really good things about this one. So I've read a couple of Allende's books before, and I've had kind of a hit and miss experience. I did read Violeta a couple months ago, and it was just so-so for me. Like a 3-star, not bad, not great. Just kind of a little bit slow and meandering. But I have heard that this one is really good, so I'm looking forward to getting into it. I believe Allende is from Chile. So she was born in Peru and raised in Chile, and she has written a litany of books. Definitely somebody who is pretty well known in the literary world. This particular book is about a gentleman named Richard Baumeister. He is a lonely university professor in his 60s, and one day he hits the car of Evelyn Ortega, a young undocumented immigrant from Guatemala. At first this seems like just a minor inconvenience, no big deal, but then Evelyn ends up like banging on his door and pleading with him for help. At a loss for what to do, he asks his tenant Lucia Maraz, a fellow academic from Chile, for advice. And then these 3 lives are going to become intertwined, and each will discover truths about how they have been shaped by the tragedies that they've witnessed. I think this is going to be emotional and really good. I'm looking forward to getting into it. And then finally, I have 3 books that are in Spanish that I'm going to talk about real quick. I believe that English versions of these books are fairly widely available. I know for sure 2 of them have English translations widely available. For the 3rd one, I'm pretty sure English translation exists. So I'm going to go over them in a little bit of detail real quick. So the first book that I have is Las Hijas de Juárez, which translates to The Daughters of Juárez. And it says it's un auténtico relato de asesinatos en serie al sur de la frontera. So an authentic discussion of murders, serial murders, the south of the border. So if you're unaware, along Juarez and the United States border, there is a spate of murders of women in particular, hundreds of them. You can find crosses all along the border representing the women that have been murdered. And as of yet, they have not found out what is killing these women. Often they are factory workers. They're often abducted, like on their way home from the factories at the outlying end of the city. And often their bodies are left in the desert and only bones are found. There have been very few leads, but lots of theories around who could potentially be murdering these women. There's been theories relating to the fact that women tried to unionize and that maybe these companies that have massive factories down there started killing women as punishment. There's been theories about there being a single serial killer or multiple serial killers that know that this area is like an open, murder ground basically. There's theories about drug cartels, and nobody has found a satisfying theory basically that properly accounts for all of these deaths. And what's even more frustrating is that the government in Mexico and even on the United States side have not really done very much to find out what's going on. So this story, written by Teresa Rodriguez, is all about the cases of the women that have gone missing. It talks a lot about the families and their experiences, like going to the police, trying to investigate themselves. Femicide is a serious thing. Next up is Latinx, En busca de las voces que redefinen la identidad latina. So that translates to In search of the voices that redefine the Latino identity. So the book is about self-discovery. Paula Ramos, who is a journalist and an activist, is basically exploring the United States and talking to people of many different identities, all Latinos, but different identities within the Latino culture. And so it says that she's talking to Afro-Latinos, trans-Latinos, indigenous Oaxaqueños, protesters who are fighting for reproductive rights in Texas, the musicians in Milwaukee with different rhythms. She talks about queer Latinos, activists, agricultural workers, Cuban Americans living in Miami, and then also immigrants detained on the border. So this is a compilation of stories, and it is exploring what it means to be Latinx, what that identity is. Alright, and the final book on my series, I left the hardest one for last, and that is 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. Roberto Bolaño is a really interesting figure. He was born in Chile and then grew up in Mexico for a large portion of his life. So then we get into the book 2666. This book is described as impossible to summarize. And the reason it's impossible to summarize is because it's like 4 separate books compiled into one. When Bolaño died, he actually wanted them to publish like one book at a time, but his friends, upon reading it, felt that it was better to publish all 4 books in one single book. So you basically have 4 separate books put together to try to make a narrative sense of them. And it covers like several different countries, a lot of different topics. It even talks about the femicide in Mexico that I was mentioning when I was talking about this book. But I think pretty universally, it's a pretty well-respected book. That is my entire TBR. So we have our series and our Hispanic heritage / Latin American heritage. And I'm very excited about all of them. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up and tell me in the comments, what are you reading this month? Do you theme out your TBRs? Are you a mood reader? Are there any books that you're particularly excited about? Or have you read any of the books that I have in this TBR? Like, tell me all about those. I want to hear what you like, what you don't like, you know, the whole shebang. And other than that, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button down below so you never miss a video. I do post pretty consistently. I typically post 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and I'm going to be moving my Friday video to Saturday morning just to make it a little bit easier on my work schedule. So hopefully I will see you in the next video. Again, I'm Caitlin Bandy. This is my channel, BandysBooks. Thanks for joining. Bye.